Alright, so as you can see, we have the AR Pro sitting out on the runway. Got a good GPS lock. Well, we have 8 satellites, but that's enough to get started and get in the air. We're going to just go out and fly towards town and maybe fly back up the river and come back up this way. And I don't know, it should just be a pretty fun flight. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to run outside and start the HD recording and get the airplane armed and ready to go. We'll do an auto takeoff and it'll loiter while I come back inside, and we'll resume from there. So I will be right back. Alright, so we're in the air, and while the airplane continues to loiter for a bit, I want to double check and make sure that my diversity controller is actually in diversity mode. So give me one more minute and I'll be right back after I do that. Okay, so that was good to go. I had played around with some stuff with that, and I just want to make sure I had set it back the way it should be. Alright, so we're going to go back to cruise mode here in just a bit. Alright, so we are flying in cruise mode now, and I'm going to gain a bit of altitude. I want to get up to, I don't know, let's get to about 300 or 350 or so. Let's try to hold about 350 or thereabout. Pretty close to it anyway. We're sitting on about 360, but that's fine. We do have about a 9-mile-an-hour crosswind right now, which is why it's kind of getting bumped around a little bit. But that's fine once again. Alright, so a couple of changes I made. We're running the Dragon Link relay like I always was, but I switched it up. It's actually sitting outside on a tripod now rather than inside the shop with me. I used to just have it kind of mounted up on my wall where it had a little bit of elevation and it wasn't down behind my computer desk where I sit when I fly. But I went ahead and mounted it on a tripod where it's running on its own battery. And it's sitting outside the shop right now. And I don't know, theoretically it should work better. It worked fine the way it was. It's just I just kind of wanted a little bit cleaner setup. And I really don't mind keeping that one extra battery up, which is really the only drawback to that setup. And I mentioned an HD recording at the start of this video. We're running the Runcam Thumb Pro, the 4K one. I'd used it on the T1 Ranger a few times. I moved it to here, to the little nose mount that I printed for it. And it's just kind of sitting in the HD camera bay where I previously had some dead weight before. In fact, that little image that I have up just kind of as to fill some of the dead space in my canvas for this recording above the analog feed there. It shows the the Rencam HD2 4K, the little orange camera, which is what I was previously recording HD video on this airplane with before, but it's not on there now. I'm recording with the Thumb Pro, so probably need to get an updated image for that at some point. But anyway, it'll give me a chance to play around with some of the stabilization stuff again and see how good or bad it is or whatever. From what I remember, I mean, a little bit of plate with it on the Ranger, it was doing okay, but the stabilization, the gyro data wasn't the best, and gyro flow kind of struggled to synchronize it sometimes, and the best way I found to correct that was just to run a lot of sync points, like more than normal, and it seemed to cope with it pretty good. But I still think it could be better. So what we're going to do right now, we're just going to kind of follow this bayou, which will slow us down a bit. You see my ground speeds drop back to about 33 miles an hour there right now. We are flying upwind, and it's actually estimating a 13 mile an hour wind right now, which is probably pretty accurate. Now, it's pretty calm on the ground, but it's blowing a pretty good bit, you know, according to the weather reports and forecasts and things like that anyway. What data I do have from there. Looks like a vehicle stopped on the bridge there. Yeah, I think we're going to kind of venture out over the river this way, which will keep us from overflying town anyway. We're just going to kind of get out over the river and follow the river back home. One reason I want it to fly out this way right now is the water level in the river is particularly low right now. You may have seen some of the news reports about the Mississippi River being unusually low right now. This river that I'm flying over right now that we're just getting over is the Atchafalaya River. And the Atchafalaya River is fed by the Mississippi River. So it is directly affected by the water level in the Mississippi. Now there's a couple of other rivers, the Red River and the Black River also empty into this one, but they're basically, they don't really feed enough water into here to keep the water level very high. Got a nice tugboat pushing some barges to follow as well. Keeps it a little bit more interesting. And we're actually showing a 17 mile an hour headwind right now. And looking at the difference, I'm showing like a 14 mile an hour difference between airspeed and ground speed. So it's probably somewhere in that range. But I knew it was going to be windy, I just didn't think it was going to be that windy. But for the wind speed, at least it does seem to be relatively smooth up here. So that's not an issue. And we do have plenty of battery. I think we have the 4S3P lithium ion battery, which if you notice in the recording or in this video anyway, I have a little kind of a ticker across the top of the screen there with some stats. Try to include some answers to some of the most common questions I get for that stuff. Yeah, hopefully this makes for a nice little stabilized video that I'll be able to do something with later. The HD, I may actually try to stabilize just the little trip upriver anyway. I just wish it wasn't so windy. Or at least not such a headwind right now, because it's kind of slowing my progress down. And we're showing, what's that again, 14? Or a 16 mile an hour difference. And it's showing my wind speed is estimated at 18 miles an hour. So even with that wind, it's still flying relatively smooth. So I'm pretty happy with that. I did just update this to 4.3.1 stable for Arduplane. I had actually updated when 4.3.0 was first released. Just not long after, maybe an hour or two after it was announced that it was online. I downloaded and updated the firmware on the flight controller. which is the 405 wing. But I never flew it with that firmware. I never got around to flying. I got sidetracked with the little Ranger and the Eagle that I've been working on. So it just kind of got set aside and I never flew it. And then 4.3.1 came out and I was flying that on the Eagle. But when I actually flew this yesterday, I meant to do this same flight yesterday when there was less wind. It probably would have made for a little more pleasant flight. But when I went to fly it, I noticed there was an issue. It was not holding its cruise altitude. Whatever you meant to cruise at, where you would just say, like this time when I climbed up to 350 and released the stick there for it to target 350 feet altitude, it would actually drop to like 300 feet. Whatever your target altitude was, it would drop to 50 feet below that and hold that altitude. And I didn't know what was going on at first, so I kind of brought the airplane back close to home and kind of started playing around, and I figured out that that's what was happening. Is at first it just felt like it was cutting power and losing altitude when it shouldn't have, when I didn't think it should anyway. So to play it safe, I just brought the airplane back home and stayed over the fields right close to home and just kind of figured that out. And I actually contacted my friend, one of the developers for Duplane, last night and asked him about it and explained what it was doing, and he said yes, it was a known bug that was released in an earlier version. He wasn't sure which, but apparently it was 4.3.0, and that it had been quickly corrected. And I guess I was just lucky enough to download the firmware before that was corrected, and then it just kind of sat dormant until I flew the airplane again. So it just kind of caught me off guard, but that's why last night I updated to 4.3.1 on here, and obviously the problem is gone. But that's why we're flying today with a 17, 18 mile an hour wind rather than yesterday when it was like 5 or 6 miles an hour. But it'll still be a pretty fun flight. Well, it still is a pretty fun flight. But I've always been really impressed with the efficiency of the AR Pro. As you can see here, we're flying into that headwind right now, and we're still holding like 120, 125 milliamp hours per mile efficiency, which I struggle to do that in calm wind with a lot of my airplanes. In fact, not many of them will match the efficiency that this one's getting right now, flying into a 16, 17 mile an hour headwind. So that's pretty good. And you'll see up here in a bit, we're actually going to fly to the far end of that clearing on the left, on the left riverbank there. That's a field. If you kind of look on the GPS map, we're just kind of skirting that riverbank, and there's a clearing that we're following right now. We're just going to fly to the far corner of that you can see in the analog feed. And there's a channel that dumps into the river from the right bank, or it kind of comes in on the right bank of the river, almost straight across from that corner there of that clearing. That's just kind of my waypoint where I'm going to turn, and that's because that's kind of where I have my antennas aimed, so that'll be putting me kind of on the edge of the cone of reception, I guess, for my antenna that's aimed in that direction. I actually haven't heard my diversity controller switch, although I do notice that my video is starting to get a little bit more noisy than typical, so it may switch here in a minute. We're probably still flying off the antenna that was pointed towards town, and it just hasn't got bad enough on that antenna to switch, and there it goes, right on cue. So yeah, now we're switched over to the other antenna that was kind of pointed in the direction that we're at right now. And I'm noticing the colors in the sky and the reflection off of the water and everything should be, we should be given a nice sunset to look at on the way home. And I do think that's what those colors and everything are from, and given the time of day, it's currently 5:15 p.m., which unfortunately this time of year means that the sun is probably setting right now. I hate this time where it gets dark at like between 5 and 5:30. I don't like it. Kind of cuts my opportunities to fly down quite a bit. But it's fine. You know, who can really complain about being able to get out and do this stuff? and with minimal expense and effort, we get to enjoy the environment in a way that not a lot of people do. So rather than find things to complain about, I tend to prefer to find things to be thankful for and to appreciate. So yeah, we're just kind of going over to the far bank of the river out here just to get a look at this little point, this little sandbar that's sticking out. It actually makes for some nice little beaches, little sandy beaches along the river while the water's low like it is. But a few weeks ago, or I don't know, 2-3 weeks ago, my dad and I rode out here with my nephew. He's got a little boat, and we came and rode out all this area here. We rode up the river, just a few more miles upstream from where I'm at right now, north of here. We rode out in the river in the boat, and along the way we saw a couple of rather large alligators that were all kind of out sunning on the bank. So it kind of would make you think twice before you maybe set up on one of those beaches to do any camping and swimming, because that's kind of where the alligators like to lay. And they do have some really big ones that call the river home. So we'll leave that to them, and we'll stay in the sky, in the air. But yeah, so I guess we're gonna go ahead and point back home. We need to kind of aim in this direction, and there's that sunset that I expected to see when we do point this direction here. And now you can see that we have a little bit of a tailwind. It's really not much. We're just kind of catching a little bit of extra help from that wind that's really hitting us from the back right quarter, mostly across wind, but it is estimating that it's pushing us a little bit. Looking at my ground speed and my airspeed, there's like a 5 mile an hour difference, and that alone will losing the headwind and gaining a little bit of tailwind like that is enough to drop that efficiency number all the way down to 80 milliamp hours per mile, and that's at cruise. So that's pretty impressive, I think. I'm pretty happy with those numbers. And like I said, I've always been pretty happy with the efficiency I get with this wing. So now I was just going to make a straight run back for home from here, but I think what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to turn where I'll be following this roadway right here, and we're not going to go very far. If you look on the map, you see that little clearing in the trees along the roadway there. You can see it on the analog feed too, there right in the middle. That's a bridge that crosses a bayou right there. So we're just going to kind of head right up there. And that's a close enough waypoint. Now we'll turn back east, or back west rather, at this point, which will put us on a path to cross that little clearing, which I do see on the analog feed coming up. And it's probably not going to show that clearing on the satellite images on the tracker and Q ground control, because that's something that was done recently. But that's just kind of one of my landmarks that I use when I fly out in this direction now. We'll fly to there, and then you can kind of see those fields coming up there, the clearing. If we shoot directly toward this corner right here, that'll take us off of the wooded area and get us back over some more of the cleared areas. This is actually, if you look in the analog feed, that little clearing that's just off of my home indicator right there, that little path through the trees, that's the one that we were kind of flying up and down exploring with the Eagle recently. We flew up this tree line to this little corner that I'm coming up on right here. Straight ahead is almost exactly 2 miles, and you see that on a GPS track too. Once we get to that corner, we'll be exactly 2 miles from home, which we are right now, as you can see. It's exactly 2 miles now. So now we can follow this pretty much straight west, and we'll be home here shortly. And that'll make for a nice little cruise out here. Hopefully we're going to get some nice video. I'm not sure how well the HD video is going to turn out. It's actually changed some settings in the Thumb Pro. I changed it up to use a fixed shutter speed and ISO setting. I'm running ISO on 100 and the shutter speed on 1/120th of a second, if I remember right. And no ND filter. and I'm hoping to get a decent light sensitivity and faster shutter speed to keep sharper frames, so that when I stabilize the video, you don't get that motion blur that moves around that doesn't match the framed image after you stabilize the video. That's what kind of gives the stabilized video, at least in my experience, what little bit I played around with it. When I stabilized the video from the Thumb Pro, it kind of made the video like smeary and weird and random blurry frames, and I think that was actually the motion blur coming from the actual physical motion of the image sensor. It was, obviously that motion blur is going to be there even after you stabilize the video, but the video doesn't move, so it doesn't really look right. So I'm trying to get rid of that motion blur is what I'm aiming to do here. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to fly-by-wire.
Fly-by-wire A.
And we'll go ahead and throttle back and start losing some altitude. And we're going to aim out in this direction and set up a landing away from the sun, which will give us a little bit of a headwind. We do have a nice tailwind right now. And it's pretty rough down here. The lower I get, the rougher it is. That's kind of one reason I want it to gain some altitude and fly at like 350 on the way out and back in. So I'm going to go ahead and power up a little bit, just to get a little bit more speed on, to help cut through the wind a little bit better. And then obviously we'll be able to float it in with that tail, or with that headwind, once we turn around and aim back into the wind. That's going to help slow us down and smooth our landing some. Some nice clouds up there from the sunset. And we are flying kind of off the back of the antennas right now. Off the back of one and off the side of the other one. That's why my diversity controller is kind of struggling, looking for a good signal. So we'll go ahead and push the nose down a little bit. We got some weird looking video right now. Some weird multipathing or something going on there, flying off the side of the antennas like that. And we'll get ready to flare like so. And we'll go back to manual. And we will disarm. I'll do that in Q ground control. I'll disarm, slide to confirm. So now we've disarmed and everything should be pretty well good to go. Hopefully it's been an enjoyable video. I will take a minute to thank you all for watching it, and any questions, comments, whatever, go below it. And as always, a huge thank you to all the monetary contributions from channel members and Patreon pledges alike, and anyone else who likes, comments, shares, dislikes, whatever, interacts with the video. So thank you for watching this one, and I'll see you all in the next one.